Good evening, and welcome. Tonight we're going to travel back in time, nearly 3,000 years, to the greatest empire the Western world has ever known, ancient Rome, but not the Rome of the history books, the dates, the battles, the lists of emperors. Tonight, we're going to explore the things about Rome that we still don't understand, the riddles, the disappearances, the secrets that 2,000 years have failed to give up. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to remember anything. There will be no quiz at the end, no important details you might miss. Just let these mysteries wash over you like the slow waters of the Tiber, drifting past marble temples under a fading evening sky. So dim the lights. Get comfortable, and let's begin our journey into the unsolved mysteries of ancient Rome. Let us begin with a mystery that is also the very beginning of Rome itself. The story every Roman child knew was the story of two brothers, Romulus and Remus, twin boys, abandoned as infants, set adrift on the river Tiber, left to die. But they did not die. The legend says they were found and nursed by a wolf, a she-wolf who cared for them in a cave as if they were her own cubs. The boys grew strong, and when they became men, they built a city on the hills where the wolf had found them. But they quarreled over who would rule, and Romulus killed his brother and named the city after himself, Rome. Now, this is clearly a legend. Wolves do not raise children, but here is the mystery. The Romans believed that the sacred cave where the wolf had sheltered the twins was a real place, a real cave, beneath one of their hills. They called it the Lupercal, and they decorated it and held ceremonies there for centuries. And then it was lost, buried under the rubble of ages. For a very long time, scholars assumed it was simply a myth, a place that had never really existed. But in 2007, archaeologists using probes deep beneath the ruins of an imperial palace found something, a hidden underground chamber, richly decorated with shells and colored marble and mosaics, exactly where the ancient texts said the sacred cave should be. Had they found the Lupercal, the very cave at the heart of Rome's founding myth? The experts still argue about it. Some are convinced, others believe it was simply an ornate dining room or a shrine to something else entirely. The chamber is too fragile to fully excavate, so it remains sealed beneath the earth, a decorated cave in exactly the right place that may or may not be the birthplace of the Roman legend. We may never know for certain, a fitting first mystery for a city that was born in the space between myth and truth. Here is a mystery that haunted the Romans themselves. In the year 9 of the Common Era, in the dark forests of Germania, 3 entire Roman legions simply vanished. Their commander was a man named Varus. He was leading some 20,000 men through unfamiliar forest, trusting a local guide, a Germanic chieftain named Arminius, who had served in the Roman army, and who Varus believed was his friend. But Arminius was leading them into a trap. In a place of dense trees and deep bogs, the tribes attacked. The Romans, strung out in a long, thin line, unable to form their battle formations, were slaughtered. For 3 days it went on. Rain poured down, and one by one, the legions were destroyed. When the news reached Rome, the Emperor Augustus was said to have been so distraught that he wandered his palace at night, beating his head against the walls, crying out, Varus, give me back my legions. Those 3 legions, the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th, were never reformed. Their numbers were considered cursed and were never used again in the entire history of Rome. And for nearly 2,000 years, no one knew where it had happened, the exact location of the battlefield. One of the most important battles in European history was completely lost. Until, in the 1980s, a British Army officer, an amateur with a metal detector, began searching a quiet area of northern Germany. And he started finding things, Roman coins, then lead sling bullets, then the scattered bones of men and horses. He had found it. Today, archaeologists are still uncovering that battlefield. They have found the silver face mask of a Roman cavalry helmet, lying in the earth, staring up at the sky, for 20 centuries. But here is what remains unsolved. We still don't know exactly what happened in those 3 days. We don't know where most of the 20,000 men lie, and we still don't fully understand how a few thousand tribesmen destroyed the most disciplined army in the world. The forest has given up only a fraction of its secret. Now, a mystery that involves a vanishing. We spoke of 3 lost legions, but there is another, a single legion, whose disappearance is one of the most debated mysteries in all of Roman history. The 9th Legion, the Legio Nona Hispana. It was one of Rome's oldest and most distinguished legions. It had fought across the empire, in Spain, in Gaul, in the invasion of Britain. We can trace its history, clearly, for over a century. And then, sometime in the 2nd century of the Common Era, it simply disappears from the record. The last solid evidence places the 9th in Britain, at the fortress of York, around the year 108. And after that, nothing certain. The legion is never clearly mentioned again. For generations, a romantic theory took hold that the 9th Legion had marched north into the wild lands of what is now Scotland to put down the fierce Caledonian tribes and had been ambushed and wiped out, massacred to the last man in the northern mists, their eagle standard lost forever. It's a haunting image, and it inspired novels and films. But modern historians are not so sure. Some scholars have found scattered evidence that fragments of the 9th may have existed later in other parts of the empire. They argue the legion was simply transferred east and perhaps destroyed much later, in a different war, in the Middle East. So which is it? Did the 9th die in the Scottish mist, eagle and all, or did it march east to vanish on some other distant frontier? The truth is, we genuinely do not know. The 9th Legion marched off the edge of history, and we have never been certain where it went. 5,000 men, and we lost them completely. Here is a mystery that you can hold in your hand, or at least a copy of it. In the year 1901, divers exploring an ancient shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera brought up a lump of corroded bronze and wood. It sat in a museum for years, ignored, just another crusty artifact from the seabed. And then someone noticed it had gears inside it, tiny, precise, interlocking bronze gears, in an object over 2,000 years old. This should not have existed. Nothing else like it would appear for over 1,000 years. The technology to make geared mechanisms this precise was thought to have been invented in medieval Europe. For decades, no one could work out what it was. It became known as the Antikythera Mechanism, and it was, quite simply, out of place in time. Using modern scanning technology, researchers have finally begun to understand it. It was an astronomical computer. By turning a handle, the user could calculate the positions of the sun and the moon, the phases of the moon, the timing of eclipses, years into the future or the past. It tracked the cycles of the planets. It even kept track of the schedule of the ancient Olympic Games. A hand-cranked computer made of bronze 2,000 years ago. And here is the mystery that remains. Who built it? Such a device could not have been the first of its kind. The craftsmanship is too refined. There must have been earlier versions, a whole tradition of such machines. So where are they? Why have we never found another? Was this knowledge lost when Rome fell? How much did the ancient world understand that we have simply forgotten they knew? The Antikythera Mechanism suggests that the ancients were far more sophisticated than we ever imagined. And it makes you wonder, what else? Did they know? That vanished when their world came to an end. Let us turn now to the most famous death in history and the mysteries that still surround it. Gaius Julius Caesar, the man who conquered Gaul, crossed the Rubicon, won a civil war, and made himself dictator of Rome for life. On the 15th of March, the day the Romans called the Ides of March in the year 44 before the Common Era, he was assassinated, stabbed 23 times by a group of senators, including men he had trusted as friends. That much we know. But around that famous death cluster a surprising number of mysteries. The first is the warning. The ancient writers tell us that Caesar was warned. A soothsayer told him to beware the Ides of March. His wife dreamed of his death and begged him to stay home. There were, they say, strange omens in the days before. How much of this was real, and how much was added later by writers who knew how the story ended and wanted to give it the shape of tragedy? We cannot untangle it now. The warnings have become part of the legend. The second mystery is his last words. Everyone knows them. Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus? The ultimate cry of betrayal. Except Caesar almost certainly never said them. Those words were written by Shakespeare over 1,500 years later. The Roman historians give us something different and stranger. Some say he said nothing at all, that he simply pulled his robe over his face and fell in silence. Others record that when he saw Brutus among his attackers, he spoke in Greek, not Latin, saying something like, "You too, child?" which has led to its own mystery. Why child? Was it simply an affectionate term for a younger man he had favored? Or was there truth to the old rumor that Brutus was, in fact, Caesar's own son from a long affair with Brutus's mother? We will never know what Caesar truly said in his final moment, or what he meant by it. The third mystery is quieter and sadder. After the assassination, in the chaos, Caesar's body lay where it had fallen for some time, and the most powerful man in the world was eventually carried home, not by soldiers or senators, but, the sources suggest, by 3 ordinary household slaves, one arm hanging down as they bore him through the streets. The man who had ruled the world carried home in the dusk by 3 frightened servants. History remembers the daggers. It rarely remembers that quiet human ending. Here is a mystery about an emperor's mind. His name was Caligula, and he ruled for only 4 years, but he became the very symbol of imperial madness. The stories about him are extraordinary, that he talked to the moon and invited it into his bedroom, that he wanted to make his favorite horse, a consul, one of the highest offices in Rome, giving the animal a marble stable, an ivory manger, and a jeweled collar, that he declared war on the sea god and ordered his soldiers to attack the ocean and collect seashells as the spoils of war. For 2,000 years, Caligula has been the textbook tyrant, insane, cruel, unhinged. But here is the mystery. Was he actually mad? Because almost everything we know about Caligula comes from writers who hated him or who wrote generations after his death, repeating stories that may have grown in the telling. The Roman elite had every reason to blacken the name of an emperor. They had murdered. Some modern historians suggest a different picture, that the horse as consul story was not madness at all, but a deliberate, biting insult, a way of telling the Senate, "You are so useless that my horse could do your job." Others suggest he may have suffered from a real illness. He fell gravely sick early in his reign, and some believe he was never the same after. Perhaps a brain inflammation, perhaps epilepsy, which the Romans little understood. Perhaps a genuine breakdown under the impossible pressures of absolute power. So which was he? A calculating man, whose cruel jokes were twisted into tales of madness? A sick man, destroyed by his own brain? Or truly, a monster? The real Caligula is lost behind a wall of hostile stories. We are left only with the legend of the madman, and the suspicion that the truth was something stranger, and perhaps sadder. Let us go now to a place frozen at the exact moment of its death, the city of Pompeii. In the year 79 of the Common Era, this prosperous town near the Bay of Naples lived in the shadow of a mountain called Vesuvius. The people did not know it was a volcano. It had slept so long that its fire had been forgotten. And then it woke. A column of ash and rock shot kilometers into the sky and began to rain down. For hours. Then came the surges of superheated gas, rushing down the mountain faster than anyone could run. And the city, and many still in it, was buried under meters of ash. Pompeii vanished and stayed hidden for nearly 1,700 years. When it was rediscovered, it was a miracle of preservation. An entire Roman town, frozen in a single moment, bread still in the ovens, election posters still on the walls, and the people themselves, preserved as hollow spaces in the hardened ash, which, filled with plaster, revealed their final poses. But Pompeii holds genuine mysteries too. The first is the date. For centuries we believe the eruption happened in August, but recent discoveries, a scrawled charcoal inscription, autumn fruits found preserved, the heavy clothing on the bodies, suggest it actually happened in October. A simple fact, the date of one of history's most famous disasters. And we are still revising it. The second mystery is more haunting. Among the bodies, archaeologists found a man whose skull appeared to have been crushed by a falling block of stone, seemingly decapitated as he fled. For years he was known as the unluckiest man in Pompeii. But more recent study suggests he may have died from the gas and heat like the others, and the stone fell afterward. Even now, we are still arguing about how individual people died on that single afternoon 2,000 years ago. And the deepest mystery of all is simply this. We have excavated only part of Pompeii. Roughly a third of the city still lies buried, unexcavated beneath the ground, untouched. There are streets in Pompeii that no living person has ever walked, houses no one has entered for 2,000 years, waiting under the ash. We have a time capsule of the Roman world, and we have opened only part of it. Here is a mystery built into the very stones of Rome. How did the Romans make concrete that lasts 2,000 years when ours crumbles in 50? It is a real and serious puzzle. Modern concrete structures begin to decay within decades. We constantly repair our bridges and buildings, and yet Roman structures still stand. The Pantheon in Rome has the largest unreinforced concrete dome on Earth, and it has stood perfectly intact for 1,900 years. Even more astonishing, Roman concrete piers built directly in the sea have survived 2,000 years of pounding salt water, which would dissolve modern concrete in no time. The Roman material doesn't just resist the seawater, it actually grows stronger because of it. For a long time, this was a genuine mystery. How was their concrete better than everything we have invented since? In recent years, scientists believe they have cracked it. The Romans mixed their concrete with volcanic ash and with small white lumps of lime that weren't fully blended in. For centuries, experts dismissed these lumps as evidence of sloppy mixing. But they were not mistakes. They appear to be a self-healing system. When a crack forms and water seeps in, the water reacts with those lumps of lime and grows new crystals that fill the crack and seal it. The concrete repairs itself. For 2,000 years, Roman buildings have been quietly healing their own wounds, growing a little stronger with every rainfall. But the mystery isn't fully solved. We still can't perfectly reproduce it. We know roughly what they did, but the exact recipes, the precise techniques passed down through generations of Roman builders, were never written down in full. They lived in the hands of the workers, and when the empire fell, those hands fell still, and the knowledge slipped away. We invented the modern world, and we are only now, slowly, relearning what a Roman builder knew by heart. Now, a mystery that surrounds Rome's most enigmatic women. In the heart of Rome, there was a temple, and within it, a sacred fire that was never, ever allowed to go out. The fire was tended by the Vestal Virgins, 6 women chosen as young girls who served the goddess Vesta for 30 years. They were among the most respected and most powerful women in all of Rome. They could own property. They had the best seats at the games. They could even pardon a condemned prisoner, simply by meeting him on the way to execution. But they lived under a terrible vow. For 30 years, they had to remain perfectly chaste. And if a Vestal broke that vow, the punishment was unspeakable. She could not be executed in the normal way, because her body was sacred. So instead, she was buried alive, sealed into an underground chamber with a little bread and water and a lamp, and left. Here is the mystery. We don't fully understand what the Romans truly believed about them. Why was a single woman's chastity tied to the very survival of Rome itself? They genuinely believed that if the sacred fire went out, or a Vestal broke her vow, the city itself was in mortal danger. And there is a deeper, stranger puzzle. The eternal flame. It was never allowed to die for over 1,000 years. What was its true origin? What ancient memory was that unbroken fire reaching back to? Some scholars believe it preserved a memory from a time before Rome, when keeping a fire alive through the night was, quite literally, a matter of survival for the whole tribe, a sacred duty passed down long after anyone remembered why. The Vestals kept the fire burning for more than 1,000 years, and then, when Rome turned to a new religion, the fire was finally allowed to go out. The order was disbanded, and we are left wondering what exactly they had been guarding all along. Here is a mystery that may have helped bring down the empire itself. For a long time, there has been a strange and troubling theory that Rome slowly poisoned itself. The Romans loved lead. They used it everywhere. Their magnificent water pipes were often made of lead. In fact, our word plumbing comes from the Latin word for lead. They lined their cooking pots with it, and strangest of all, they deliberately added it to their food and wine. They would boil down grape juice in lead pots to make a sweet syrup they called defrutum. The lead reacted with the juice to create a sweet-tasting compound. They used the syrup to sweeten their wine and preserve their food. They were, in effect, eating lead as a sweetener. Lead, we now know, is a powerful poison. In high doses, it causes madness, sickness, infertility, and death, and it accumulates in the body over time. So the theory goes that the Roman elite, who could afford the most sweetened wine and the finest food, were slowly poisoning themselves. That this could explain the apparent madness of some emperors, the falling birth rates among the aristocracy, and perhaps contributed to the slow decline of the whole civilization. It is a haunting idea. An empire destroyed by its own taste for sweetness. But here is why it remains a mystery rather than a fact. Other scientists strongly disagree. They point out that the Romans' lead pipes quickly built up a coating of mineral deposits that mostly sealed the lead away from the water. They argue that lead levels in Roman bones, while higher than ours, were probably not high enough to cause mass poisoning. So did lead help bring down Rome? Or is it a dramatic myth that we find too compelling to let go of? The debate continues. We know the Romans absorbed far more lead than was good for them. We simply don't know whether it was enough to help topple an empire. Let us turn now to one of the strangest objects the Roman world ever left behind. They are called Roman dodecahedra. Imagine a small object about the size of an orange, made of bronze. It has 12 flat faces, each one a perfect pentagon. In the center of each face there is a hole, and the holes are all different sizes. And at each of the 20 corners there is a small round knob. They are beautifully made, carefully crafted. Clearly, they mattered to whoever made them, and we have absolutely no idea what they were for. More than 100 of these objects have been found, scattered across the northern parts of the Roman Empire, in Britain, in France, in Germany. They date from around the 2nd to the 4th centuries of the Common Era. And here is the deepest part of the mystery. Not a single Roman text, not one, ever mentions them. In all the thousands of pages of Roman writing that survive, no one ever describes one. No one explains what it is. No one says, "Fetch me my dodecahedron." There are no instructions, no drawings, nothing. It is as if an entire category of object simply existed and was used and was completely silent in the written record. So what were they? The theories are endless. Some say they were measuring devices, perhaps for surveying land or estimating distances. Some say they were used to calculate the best time to plant crops by sighting the sun through the different-sized holes. Some say they were candle holders. One found example had wax inside it. Some say they were knitting tools for making the fingers of woolen gloves, the different holes for different finger sizes, and some say they were religious, magical, ritual objects whose meaning was secret, known only to a few, and never written down precisely because it was sacred. That last idea might explain the silence. If these objects were part of some private cult or craft tradition, the knowledge passed hand to hand, never committed to paper. Then, when that tradition died, the meaning died with it, completely, leaving only the beautiful, baffling objects behind. You can go to a museum today and stand in front of one of these things, a perfect, careful bronze puzzle made by skilled hands 2,000 years ago, and nobody on earth can tell you for certain what it is. Here is a mystery about the most secret books in Rome, in the heart of the city, locked away beneath a temple. Rome kept a collection of sacred texts. The Sibylline Books, the legend of how Rome got them, is wonderful. The story goes that long ago, in the time of the last kings, a mysterious old woman, the Sibyl, a prophetess, came to the king of Rome. She offered to sell him 9 books of prophecy, but she named an enormous price. The king refused. It was too much, so the old woman walked away, burned 3 of the books, and came back offering the remaining 6, for the same price as the original 9. The king refused again. He thought she was mad, so she burned 3 more, and came back offering the final 3 books, still for the price of the original 9. And now the king was unnerved. He consulted his priests, who were horrified to learn what had been lost. He paid the full price for just 3 books, and the old woman handed them over and was never seen again. Those 3 surviving books became one of Rome's most guarded treasures. They were kept under lock and key, and consulted only in times of great crisis, terrible plagues, disasters, omens. A special college of priests were the only ones permitted to read them, and what they contained was kept secret from the public. And here is the mystery. We don't really know what was in them, because they were destroyed. The original books were lost when their temple burned down in the year 83 before the Common Era. Rome was so distraught at the loss that they sent envoys across the entire ancient world to collect surviving prophecies and reassemble a new collection. And even that reconstructed version was eventually burned, deliberately, centuries later, as Rome's old religion faded. So one of the most important documents in Roman history, a book they believed could foretell the fate of the city, was lost twice. And we are left with only fragments, quoted by other writers, and the haunting story of the old woman, and the burning books, and the price. That only went up, the more she destroyed. Here is a quieter mystery, a mystery of absence. Where are the emperors? Rome was ruled by emperors for 500 years, dozens upon dozens of them, men who controlled the entire known world, men who were worshipped as gods, whose faces were on every coin, whose statues stood in every city. And yet we have the physical remains of almost none of them. Augustus, the first emperor, built himself an enormous tomb, a vast circular monument in the heart of Rome. It still stands partly, but it is empty. His ashes, and those of the emperors buried with him, are gone, scattered or stolen or simply lost at some point over the centuries. The mighty tomb of the Emperor Hadrian still stands too. It became a fortress and then a castle, and you can visit it today. But the emperor's remains are gone from there as well. We have the bodies of pharaohs from thousands of years before Rome. We can look upon the actual faces of Egyptian kings who died 1,000 years before Rome was even founded. But the Roman emperors, the masters of the Western world, have almost entirely vanished. We have their statues, their coins, their words, but the men themselves, their physical remains, slipped away into the chaos of the empire's long decline. Tombs were robbed, ashes were scattered, monuments were stripped for their stone. It is a strange thought that we can gaze upon the preserved face of an Egyptian pharaoh, but we will likely never look upon the face of Caesar Augustus, or Hadrian, or Marcus Aurelius. They ruled the world, and then the world simply misplaced them. Here is a final mystery, a religion hidden underground. Across the Roman Empire, archaeologists keep finding them. Strange underground temples, small dark chambers, often built to resemble caves, with long stone benches running down each side, and at the far end, almost always, the same carved image. A young man in a flowing cap, kneeling on the back of a bull, and plunging a dagger into its neck. This was the cult of Mithras. It was one of the most popular religions in the Roman Empire, especially among soldiers and merchants. It spread to every corner of the Roman world. We have found these temples from Britain to the Middle East, and yet we barely understand it at all, because Mithraism was a mystery religion, a secret cult. To join, you had to be initiated, and the initiates swore never to reveal what they had learned, and they kept that oath so perfectly that almost nothing was ever written down. We know there were 7 ranks of membership that initiates rose through, like grades. We know they shared ritual meals on those long stone benches. We know the bull-slaying image was central, and that it was full of symbolic meaning. The bull, a dog, a snake, a scorpion, the sun and moon, arranged in a precise pattern that clearly meant something. But what did it mean? What did they believe? What happened during the initiations, which some scattered hints suggest may have involved ordeals, tests of courage in the dark? We do not know. The followers of Mithras took their secret to their graves with perfect discipline. We have their temples. We have their sacred image repeated hundreds of times. We have everything except the one thing that matters, the meaning. It is one of the great silences of history, a major religion practiced by thousands for centuries right across the Roman world, and it kept its secret so well that 2,000 years later, we are still standing outside the door, in the dark, wondering what they knew. And here is the greatest mystery of all, the one that has occupied historians for centuries. Why did Rome fall? The Western Roman Empire had ruled the Mediterranean world for centuries, and then it came apart. The last emperor in the West, a boy ironically named Romulus, like the city's founder, was deposed in the year 476. But here is the strange thing. There was no single moment of collapse, no great final battle, no sudden catastrophe. It happened slowly, so slowly that many people living through it may not have realized it was happening at all. They thought they were living in Rome. They went on, paying taxes, farming, trading, as the empire quietly dissolved around them. And historians have never agreed on why. Some blame the endless waves of migrating peoples pressing on the borders. Some blame economic collapse and the debasement of the currency. Some blame political chaos. In one 50-year stretch, there were more than 20 emperors, most of them murdered. Some blame plague, which swept through and emptied the cities. Some blame the vast size of the empire, too large to govern, too long to defend. Some blame the rise of a new religion that changed Roman values. Some, as we heard, even blame lead. One scholar famously counted over 200 different theories that have been proposed for the fall of Rome. 200 theories for a single question. And the honest answer is that it was probably all of them and none of them. A slow tangle of causes feeding into each other over centuries until one day people looked around and the empire was simply no longer there. But here is the part I find most beautiful. Rome did not really end. In the East, the empire continued for another 1,000 years. And in the West, even after the emperors were gone, Rome lived on. In language, French, Spanish, Italian are all the children of Latin. In law, in architecture, in the alphabet you are reading right now, in the months of the year, in the calendar on your wall. Rome did not so much fall as dissolve, spreading out into everything that came after. The greatest mystery of Rome's fall may be that, in a sense, it never fully did. And so, our journey ends, where all journeys end, back in the quiet of the present. The Colosseum still stands tonight, under the same stars the gladiators knew. The hidden cave beneath the hill still keeps its secret. The 9th Legion is still lost. The Antikythera computer still ticks in our imagination. And somewhere under the ash of Pompeii, whole streets still wait that no living person has ever walked. So much of Rome we have recovered. The roads, the names, the marble, the laws. And yet so much remains just beyond our reach, sealed in fragile chambers, buried under modern cities, lost in the gap between what was written down and what was simply known and then forgotten. The Romans believed that a person dies twice, once when the body fails, and a second time, later, the last time their name is ever spoken aloud. By that measure, the Romans are still alive. We speak their names, we walk their roads, we puzzle over their secrets, late at night, 2,000 years after they lived. Some of their mysteries will be solved in your lifetime. New chambers will open. New scans will reveal what lies beneath the sphinx-like silence of the ruins. New names will be spoken again after centuries, and some mysteries will simply remain as they are, quiet, patient, waiting in the earth. And maybe that's all right. The embers of Rome have long gone cold, but they still glow, faintly, in everything that came after. Sleep well.